Howdy nerds, Kevin, Gone Rogue Games. So I've had a few requests for me to go over what I like to call the non-S tier games and give an overview of how they're doing in this bull market we have got going on into the 2024 holiday season. So typically what ends up happening in the TCG world is if one of them starts to take off, it has this domino effect that all of them start to take off. And I'm going to reiterate that a lot of this is still stupid money. So people look at the price of Pokemon, they're like, okay, well then what else can I get into that hasn't gone up yet? And then Magic starts getting pumped up. And then is where we start to see the other things like Wise Shores and Universes and Lorcana and Star Wars Unlimited. Some of these other ones that the S tier games that I would put right now is definitely Magic and Pokemon. They're the ones that have been around forever. They're the ones that usually are the trendsetters in these bull markets. And then we have the ones that I'd put below that I still consider the A tiers. So Lorcana, Star Wars Unlimited, and One Piece, I think have all solidified themselves as like games that are going to stick around. So I think I'm going to focus on Lorcana, Star Wars Unlimited, and we're going to get a little bit of a discussion on Metazoo. I mean, I'm going to tick some people off about Metazoo, but man, oh man, Metazoo's back in the conversation. And this is unfortunately what happens when one set like Pokemon, so Pokemon has just gone nuts. And I've done a billion videos about it. I'm not going to beat the dead horse in this one. It is what it is. It's going to stay nuts for a while until the trend starts, backpedaling the other way, which I still foresee happening in the future. I don't think that Pokemon can keep this sort of energy indefinitely. And this is just typical Pokemon that we see with these ebbs and flows, these cycles of the Pokemon market. So anyway, let's talk. First of all, what should I start with? We got Lorcana coming out. So let me give an analysis of Lorcana. So maybe, do you want me to rank these games of where I feel which is the most healthy and which I feel is like struggling or what they need to do? I guess I'll give my opinions. We'll start with Lorcana. So Lorcana has Azure She coming out. I believe it's the 6th set. And this is what I'm seeing with Lorcana. The prices of certain things need to come down. I still think the collectability of Lorcana is not as strong as the market has indicated it is, because if you actually look at the sales for a lot of the Enchanteds, there seems to be a trend that they are struggling in the sales department, but people are still being very greedy is not the right word. Stubborn is probably the better word, of thinking that the Enchanted Tales are worth more than they really are, comparatively to how rare they are to open up or how many exist in the market. So I'm expecting those come down, and unfortunately what ends up happening when the chase cards I don't know if I'd call it make or break with Lorcana, but it is still a lot of the appeal is Lorcana was a little bit marketed as Pokemon 2.0 as far as the collectible aspect of it. So Magic is all utility now. They've killed collectability. There's no, besides unless you're doing One Ring or serialized cards, they've really ramped it up to where, I need to talk about that. So Market Monday, I actually will talk about some signs that I'm seeing in Magic the Gathering, which are actually really, really cool for collectability. However, Magic the Gathering has they've thrown the average collectability of their cards into the crapper. I was pulling some medallions for a customer, a patron that wanted to purchase some medallions. I'm like, oh man, all I have left is foils, and all I have is like alternate, so borderless or alternate arts, foils, and just specialty versions of these medallions that came out in Modern Masters or Modern Horizons 3 and Commander. It's like, I'm not sure if you're willing to pay the difference between a normal version and a regular version of the medallion and these specialty versions. And then actually when I looked them up, I'm like, never mind. There's really no difference between the specialty versions and the normal. So Magic the Gathering has just tanked their collectability, and utility is the big selling point to Magic. People are still buying Magic cards. They're still playing with Magic cards. It is still insanely robust with the amount of people that are playing Commander, Standard. It's in very good shape as far as the player counts are concerned. In fact, people would argue that it might be at really its highest levels. Maybe Magic has plateaued, but at least it stayed at a very, very high plateau as far as a game that has a lot of utility-driven sales. So going back to Lorcana, Lorcana has a lot of utility too. So in that aspect, I am going to give definitely Lorcana the thumbs up, that they are still encouraging play. There still seems to be a lot of tournaments. The sales actually do spike when there are big tournaments, and that aspect of the game is doing well. However, utility is not doing enough to strip the supply, in my opinion, for Lorcana. I'd like to see Lorcana see more of a robust atmosphere as far as at game stores, where that is stripping more of the more of the reasons to buy the boxes than people cracking for the enchanted versions of the cards. Because like I stated, I don't think that the sales data really supports that enchanteds are worth as much as they are. And it's just a lot of stubbornness, or a lot of people looking at the Pokemon market and thinking that these things will be worth more than they are. Now, people might argue with me because some of the first chapter stuff have recovered and gone up. But there are some concerning signs like Ursula's and even Shimmering Skies. And a lot of those box prices are not moving in according to how long they've been out and how much supply is left. And so Lorcana, though, I would still give like a B. I would still say that it is in a very good... the price point is pretty good, pretty decent. People can still make money on it. There are still enough people that are collecting the cards. There are still enough people that are playing the game. And that I am not concerned whatsoever in an overall crash of Lorcana. All right, so that's Lorcana. So let's get on to Star Wars Unlimited, because there's a certain person that's been a bit poo-pooing about Star Wars Unlimited, basically hyping up all of these games, and then looking at Star Wars Unlimited and basically claiming that it's failed. I don't see the same thing with Star Wars Unlimited. Now, first of all, I have no skin in the game here. I'm not a Star Wars fan. I don't play Star Wars Unlimited. I played the starter decks and built one deck. That's my experience with Star Wars Unlimited. And I thought it was cute. I thought it had some cool mechanics that were interesting. It was, in my opinion, it's too similar to Magic. I think these games that have very similar ways of playing, like, I end up just playing, why don't I just play Magic? Because I'm a Magic player. There isn't enough difference between like Lorcanas and Star Wars Unlimited to really get me excited to like, okay, I'm going to play this instead of Magic. But I know the appeal is there for other people. And rather than reinvent the wheel, I get it. That you should just work with what's working in a TCG and build off of it, rather than try to figure out an entire way to play a TCG. And I think that's actually smart for things like Lorcana and Star Wars Unlimited. So Star Wars Unlimited, like I said, has been being poo-pooed by certain people, saying it's an utter fail. Now, typically speaking, it is the third set that is the overall make or break for a TCG. If they can survive that third set and still have robust sales, then the game will probably last a long time. If they don't, and I think My Hero Academia and the Universes was the perfect example of this, then they begin to really, really decline. And I don't know if I'll talk about My Hero Academia in this particular video. Possibly, maybe we'll touch on it. But Star Wars is being absolutely hailed as a failure right now. And that is because the box prices have collapsed from the second set and the third set, and now we're actually starting to see the first set go down from the 200s down into 150s, and people are in panic mode about Star Wars. However, with that being said, I've been looking at Star Wars. So there's some good things and there's some bad things about Star Wars. The first is, what do they call the borderless? So they have borderless cards that are Ultra Chase 2. They're foil versions of the card, and they're extremely rare. And the market is absolutely ridiculous with how much they think that they are worth, because that has been the area of Star Wars Unlimited that suffered the most. Most of those have, even from the first set, have come down dramatically. When people are expecting $400, $300 per card for these Ultra Chase versions of the card, and then the sales data has been less and less per month, and the price has actually been going down, and most of them are now worth around the 200s. So I think that those still need to come down a lot more. So this is where, like, these games that are expecting to be Pokemon, they can't expect to be Pokemon. Like, Pokemon is driven by a lot of nonsensical insanity, in my opinion, where people have these price memories of cards being able to reach those prices. So the market is definitely more stubborn and more willing to pay, and, people are willing to, pay these prices for cards because there is a historical data that they can, like, compare this to. Like, this card from this era is worth this much, so this card can be worth that. Lorcana and Star Wars Unlimited do not have that. They're trying to figure out exactly how much their Ultra Chase versions of cards are. But if you shift over to Magic the Gathering and look at demand versus pack price versus how much these cards go for, I think that it's very unreasonable to think that Enchanteds and these Star Wars cards that are going in the hundreds of dollars are actually worth hundreds of dollars. I think that they are, like, maybe in the hundreds, like $100 range, $100 to $200 range, but expecting $300, $400 for these things, I think is a bit unreasonable. And I think the market's going to have a lot of adjustment, and that's going to make these products naturally just a lot less appealing for people that want to crack boxes or collect boxes, and it is starting to have this kind of doom and gloom feeling about, you know, people that have got in the early investments in these things. I think they're a little bit jaded now because their investments are definitely not paying off. Now, Lorcana's first edition, very good. To their first chapter, still doing really good. Star Wars Unlimited's first one, still doing very good. Where it has struggled with Lorcana, even I would say that the Floodborne hasn't lived up to expectations and hype, and the printing is definitely increased from set to set with Lorcana. And we still don't even know Lorcana's reprint policy. It's very weird with both Star Wars Unlimited and Lorcana that they haven't done subsequent waves of their first one, and they have done subsequent waves of their like second edition of like Floodborne and even Shimmering Skies and stuff. I don't know if they had like second waves of it, but they had a lot more supply come in like not necessarily reprints, but subsequent waves that have come back in, because every now and again I'll see some distributors restocked in some of these Lorcana products, but first chapter I haven't seen anything available, and that's kind of the same feeling. So it is weird that they're doing that, and I think that both of those companies are trying to, like, that's smart. You want to give some reason for people to long-term want to hold your product or feel like that it's going to have value later down the road. And by destroying your first edition, your first product, I think is not smart, even though I think the game probably needs, both these games need more of the supply just for utility's sake for both those games. So back to Star Wars Unlimited. I am not doom and gloom with Star Wars Unlimited, because if you actually look at the data for Star Wars Unlimited, there is still as many boxes sold on Star Wars Unlimited than the other, tier 1 or tier 2 games. And the supply, I think, will correct itself. That's the major issue, is I think that it was a little bit overhyped. The first edition got sold through the roof. It went up from... So first of all, too, where I think that some of these other personalities are wrong with Star Wars Unlimited is, if you actually look at the cost of the box versus the cost they're selling for, it's actually not that, like, it's not apples and apples. You can't look at a Star Wars Unlimited box and say, oh, it's only selling for 75, and then say, well, these Lorcana boxes are selling for 100. And because Star Wars Unlimited does cost less from the distributor than something Lorcana. So it's not apples and apples, just in price comparison with that. So overall, there is still margins to be made. It's very slim now on Star Wars Unlimited. The problem is a lot of people overpaid on the secondary market. There has been a much more reasonable spread with Star Wars Unlimited from where stores get it from distributor to where they were able to sell in the secondary market. A lot of that has to do with the maps that they put in place and the way they've released it. But once all of that is gone off of its little cycle, then the secondary market has readjusted it back closer to distribution level. And I think that's where a lot of this doom and gloom is coming, is people didn't, the people that did buy from the secondary market, they haven't been able to make their profits that they expected, like the first edition of Star Wars. And that's now starting to set in with this, like I said, this little bit of a doom and gloom, and this game is failing and blah, blah, blah. But if you actually look at the sales data, where I rate games is on a couple of different factors. The first of all is, if you look at the utility cards, you go look at deck lists of cards that are seeing play, and then you go and compare to how many are being sold, and then you just do a little bit of like price comparison to how the collector cards are being sold and whatnot. And Star Wars is actually doing very good on utility cards. Now, it still shows me there's a lot of mass box openers, because it must have been very profitable to crack boxes and try to find those borderless cards that sell for hundreds of dollars. However, I think, again, that's going to correct itself to where now it's going to start to even out more of where the utility cards are going to be worth more, because Star Wars is still, it's very similar to Pokemon right now. Some of the utility cards are very, very cheap. The collectible cards are very, very expensive. And I put Lorcana kind of in that same boat too. And those are starting to adjust, which is a good thing. That's what should happen in a game that has what I call kind of true organic demand of people both collecting and playing the game, rather than just speculative driven. And unfortunately, like 2022 was bad, and that's where we'll get into that conversation with Universes and Metazoo, because both of those games they jumped the gun. So I guess it's a good segue. We'll talk about One Piece, and we'll get into kind of Universes and Metazoo, which is, both of those games are very, very like worrisome, and why I would avoid Metazoo like the plague right now until something changes. But back to the one that I think is actually performing the best is One Piece. So One Piece seems to have the best of all the worlds. The collector cards are doing insanely good. The box prices are have been very reasonable once they've been released, and then they've been able to have that natural growth. There seems to be demand even in the sets that are considered like stinker sets. So what was the one, the yellow box? No, what can I think with the 500 years in the future? That one was considered like people were panicking over that because that price collapsed, and now it's back up in the 80s. And the Two Legends is actually doing pretty bad compared to some of the other releases. They just had their premium booster that was released, and that thing sold through the roof. But Two Legends seems to be a little bit overprinted, and the demand for it just wasn't as great as people anticipated. But if you actually look at the sales data, it's selling through really well. And if the rate of how much these are being sold continues, then that should recover. And then if you look at the prices of cards that are seeing play, and the cards that are being collected, both of those have very, very good indicators that this game is here to stay, and there actually is that true organic demand for these type of cards. So One Piece, out of all of the games that have been in 2024, I would still say it is in the healthiest place. Pokemon, I don't like hysteria driven. Magic really needs to. I mean, we're kind of going through this too many sets released, too much hype. People, they need to slow their roll with Magic the Gathering. I think we're going to start to see some cracks happen again, to where we're going to see some prices start to bottom out because there's just too much competing product on the open market. And I was hoping for 2024 where we could really eat up a lot of this old supply and get Magic on like a healthy path again, to where older products still have demand and newer products still have the reasonable anticipation for people wanting to open up and collect cards. So anyway, One Piece though, I would say Magic and Pokemon doing great, but One Piece I think would be the clear winner. So reiterate back to where Lorcana on Stars Unlimited. So it'll be interesting with both of these sets. So Stars Unlimited, as I said, similar to One Piece, the sell-through rate is actually pretty good on both their second set and the third set. I wouldn't be as doom and gloom as some of these other content creators have been, because doom and gloom is when things are not moving, where it's single-digit boxes per day. Or if you look at the cards you're seeing playing decks, and 1 or 2 sales per day. Where I'm still seeing with Stars Unlimited, you compare it to anything, even Magic and Pokemon, and the sell-through rate is pretty good. There's still that demand there, and it isn't from. It's easy to show speculative, where people are just buying certain products and cards through speculative demand, and you can actually see kind of utility demand or collectability demand, where people are actually purchasing because they want the things for their own collection. So going on to Metazoo and on to Universes. So Universes has still been pushing a lot of their product out. Universes is this. I'll show you what Universes is. So this is what I call kind of that pandemic era of everything is gold, when nothing is, where everyone thought that TCGs would just sell themselves. And if you remember Universes, the My Hero Academia was so popular they did a second edition. So they had the. I'm so glad that most games are done away with this nonsense of doing first edition and second edition, because all you're doing is guaranteeing that second edition will be lackluster compared to your first edition. And it was this nonsense to like let the investors and collectors get in early and be rewarded for their support. Be rewarded for your support that you got in early of a box and were able to have this before it got mass produced or mass played. So when these games like Flesh and Blood or Universes did these first edition, or Metazoo did these first edition, all they did was guaranteed that the unlimited version or the second printing of the version was going to be a lackluster product and have basically no collectability compared to their first edition. And why would you set yourself up for failure? That's if it needs a reprint, it needs a reprint. It doesn't need a lackluster reprint. And so I'm really glad that these companies have stopped listening to certain people and have just gone to normal printings and been able to gauge the market for, like, does this need a reprint? Does this need to have more additional inventory into the supply so that it could actually meet demand? So Universes, I'm thinking, has gotten away from that. Hopefully they have. But Metazoo, let's get to the kind of the elephant in the room. Metazoo is back in the news, back in the hype, because if you haven't heard, it's been purchased by a massive Pokemon collector that's huge in the Pokemon collecting, investing sphere, and it put out a pretty penny to buy the IP for Metazoo. The problem with Metazoo is Metazoo, and again, I'm going to offend a lot of people here, it never had legs. So how I prove this is go back on TCG Player and look at the sales data and look at the price of some of these cards compared to how much they were sold for and quote unquote what decks they were actually good in. So look at like Mothman, look at the Rudy card, look at all of these things that have these high prices and ask yourself, is this something that had true demand with such low, miserable sales? $100 card should have way more sales than just a handful in its lifehood. So it just shows to me that Metazoo is the ultimate investors selling to investors. Now I'm going to get comment section flooded with people in their little niches and their little communities and at their game stores that enjoyed the game. I won't argue with you. Even locally here, some people got into Metazoo and there have been some people that really enjoyed and loved the game. The problem is there needs to be a one-for-one comparison with sales data, and like you can't look at things through your own little bubble. So, and expect that to be nationwide or worldwide of how it's going. And Metazoo, in my opinion, was the most predatory product, where it was all based upon the speculation that at some point it will be popular. It was marketed as Pokemon 2.0, but it doesn't have any IP behind it. They tried to work off these little, pop culture reference and things. And the problem is that it tried to sprint before it even learned how to crawl. That they were doing these ultra premium versions, that they were doing these first editions, that these first editions got eaten up by speculators that people couldn't get the product, that caused the second editions, which then again made it so the second editions were just doomed to fail because now they were an inferior product compared to the first edition. And they directly competed with the supply of the first editions out. And so now the first editions were less valuable as a result. So all it did was cause a massive collapse in everything. And Metazoo did it to such a point that I believe that they were just always saying, okay, we're going to get there, we're going to get there, we're going to get there. And then all the other people too, we're going to get there. Eventually, we're going to get this demand. We're going to get these stores that are going to start carrying it. We're going to get this scene. It's going to happen. So just wait. And I think Flesh and Blood also went through this. Like Flesh and Blood finally had to come to terms that their game was not as big as they thought it was. That it was being pumped up by people investing or speculating that somewhere down the future it will be as big. That's what if you can go back to like what 2019, where I had videos on my Rogue Deck Builder channel saying that there should not be Black Lotus prices in a game that is brand new. There cannot be these type of prices. There hasn't been enough time to garner this much popularity. Even for as much as what people wanted, like an alternative Magic or whatever hot new thing, it doesn't matter. You can't take, it could be the hottest thing in the entire universe, but if it's brand new, it cannot expect to have the pricing of something like Pokemon and something like Magic the Gathering. So that's what I really warn people that are going to get sucked back into the Metazoo. And I'm not saying that Metazoo can't ever get there. If you like Metazoo, if you want it to be a successful game, if it's your cup of tea, then you should also be wanting this to occur and not for it to go back into this pump and dump type, speculators only selling to speculators, and having these little niche groups here that actually do enjoy and playing it. And there's nothing wrong with niche groups and niche things. That's the same thing I was saying with Universes. Universes probably could have been successful if it wouldn't have printed into that speculative demand. If it would have tried to stay more focused on the things that were actually working, on the groups that were actually working, rather than try to go incredibly mainstream before it had that capability of doing so. And that's my kind of warning that I'm hoping that Star Wars and Lorcana can kind of do what a Flesh and Blood did, and they need to take a step back and they say, okay, yes, we want our game to grow, and we do believe in our game, and we're very excited with how our game has, so Lorcana and Star Wars have nothing but praise for each other of how their games have been successful. So be proud of it and you cheer it all you want, but you have to come back to being realistic that maybe your game is not as big as you think it is, and then reevaluate the print runs and reevaluate what you need to do to accept that and then move forward with it. Otherwise, the collapse can be, when the collapse is real with these games, like Universe is the biggest warning, because that was like overnight with its third set. This third set didn't do well, and a lot of their subsequent reprints into their second editions really started competing with the first editions, and just led to people then giving up on the first editions and putting them on the market. And then it led to an insane collapse of their game to where now what a lot of these booster boxes are like $20. You can buy them on. And the sad thing about Universe is it still has pretty good sell-through data. Like, people are still buying the game, they're still playing the game, tournaments are still happening, but the supply absolutely was just too much compared to their growth and compared to the people that are actually playing their game. And Flesh and Blood, I really want to admonish the people in Flesh and Blood that they avoided a Metazoo type situation. Well, again, Flesh and Blood actually had people playing it. Like, I'm going to keep beating this home. The Metazoo is just insanely overhyped. And I mean, it was just the Emperor had no clothes with Metazoo. And when people finally realized it, I mean, the writing was on the wall way before the company started doing shady things and, you know, weren't transparent with the public of how, you know, financially dire things were. So Flesh and Blood, I got to admonish them for they avoided that entire situation where they were actually to look at what they had, embrace what they had, double down on what they had, readjust their print runs based upon what they had, and relax and allow time for their market to kind of recover. So I'm still not the most bullish on Flesh and Blood because it's going to take a long time to correct the problems they had with their early boxes. I mean, the supply of them were just insane, the amounts out there, and it's going to take some time for the market to absorb those. And Flesh and Blood's kind of weird with when they release new heroes and new cards. A lot of times the demand is for those new things, and so you don't have the greatest way of being able to eat up that older supply through just people wanting those older cards, because now when they create a new character, of course, then all the eyes are on the new characters. And I get it. There are still cards that do work. Like, okay, a lot of times they release these expansion sets that then breathe new life in these older cards, but it's going to take some time. Regardless of it's going to take a lot of time to start eating that up. So anyway, this has kind of been a long-winded video on what I view going into 2024, where we're at. So again, I try to be realistic about things. Like, a lot of people are so like hype. And I think you should have a healthy dose of just reality on, you know, where things are at. And it doesn't mean that I'm not still a cheerleader to these type of things. I want TCGs to be robust. I want people to have I don't want just Magic and Pokemon. I want a plethora of options that are all very, very successful and people to enjoy the hobby and industry the way they want. So I want them all to be good. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this video. This has been Kevin with Godnor Games. Thanks for watching.